Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this 17th day of August, 2010, this Tuesday edition. First, I wanted to get into the Pentagon and the media are really beating the drum now that China is our enemy and that China is a threat. And, of course, that's true, but not in the perspective, not in the way that they are presenting it. If you look at the deals that Richard Milhouse Nixon, under Kissinger's directives, engaged in back in the 1970s, and you look at what the ambassador to China set up, George Herbert Walker Bush in the 70s, the globalists, the Council on Foreign Relations and others, the Anglo-American elite, went to China and said, we will make you the heart of the future world government. In the next century, the 21st century, will be the Chinese century. We want to move our main base of operations over to China. They then, in subsequent administrations of Ford, Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, Clinton, George W., and now Obama, got laws passed and engaged in regulatory maneuvers where almost all of our industry moved to China. They raised the taxes, increased the regulations, the harassment on the United States, and then put tax incentives in to move industry to China. The United States, countless times, has given our weapons technology to China. They've conduited the technology to Israel, who publicly sells it to the highest bidder, not just to China, but to South Africa, France, anybody else, Russians, who will buy it. You're not supposed to criticize what Israel's doing, basically taking over many areas of the Pentagon and creating the Office of Special Planning that creates the fake WMD propaganda and that uses the private contractors privatizing the military to feed disinfo. I mean, it's just incredible how this country's been taken over. So the United States, for all intents and purposes, isn't even manufacturing most of its military hardware in the United States. It's going on in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and now in some cases, China. They're even starting some of their weapons contracts for some of the components in Vietnam, in South Korea. I mean, this is a joke. We can't even make our weapons here because the United States is being dissolved. We supply poor people to be the manpower of the military because they can't get regular jobs. That's the plan. And the United States is having its credit card run up into astronomical stratospheric red to fund the globalization. Then the United States is to be blamed and is being blamed for all the ills of the world. You see this with global media consortiums like News Corp. In European publications they own, they demonize the United States, but then domestically they push the wars and all the propaganda and tell us that we're fighting a holy, fight for Christendom in the clash of civilizations. So they're playing all different sides off against each other in this complex balancing act. And now the Pentagon comes out and says, oh my gosh, China is now the second biggest economy. Within 12 months, they're set to be the biggest economy. They are the biggest user of energy. Within 3 years, they will completely dwarf us, not only overtake us. In China and India and 100 plus other, it's over 160, third world and developing world nations have zero environmental standards, zero carbon taxes, and then tax incentives for our businesses to move there. Of course, the country's going into cardiac arrest. Of course, all the new state and federal taxes are causing the economy to go into cardiac arrest even faster. This is all a consolidation operation. So all these people in the media that wrap themselves in the American flag and say that if you're against wars, that if you're against invasions, that if you're against all of this tyranny, all of these individuals that are out there promoting this, they know full well what they're doing. They know full well what they are a part of. And then they always sell you on naked body scanners and checkpoints and surveillance cameras and face scanning and license plate reading cameras on their fighting Al-Qaeda. But then you discover Al-Qaeda is their creation to destabilize, whether it's southern Serbia or whether it's Pakistan or Afghanistan. It's a divide and conquer mode. And you discover that almost all of the training that goes on, I'd say over 95% of it or more, is not for fighting turbaned men from Central Asia or the Middle East. The entire architecture of this is designed and publicly admitted to be for the American people. And there's a giant, illegal, covert intelligence operation now going public, because they've completed it, of threat fusion centers, federalizing police with the CIA in control of the bases, merging local police with the military. This is all happening now. So let's go over some of this latest propaganda. They've destroyed our industry. They're coming in with the carbon taxes. They're federalizing everything. And then they tell you that China is supplanting the United States when it's the globalist and the Council on Foreign Relations. Just search the term CFR.org, the Chinese century. And they brag with pleasure in countless C-SPAN productions in the last decade. Before that, they were having secret meetings, and the CFR was almost completely secret. Now they're out in the open saying that this was part of their plan to where we're totally dependent on China, who is authoritarian and has enslaved their people, and who is a eugenic state carrying out forced abortions, infanticide, one-child policies, and mass drugging of their water supplies, just as our water supplies are drugged. They are on the globalist team. They work with the bankers. And now they're giving the public the narrative of why we're collapsing, blaming it on the communist Chinese, when they're only a large engine in the larger structure. They're just one of the larger cogs in all of this. Pentagon warning over Chinese military buildup, French news agency. China is extending its military advantage over Taiwan and increasingly looking beyond, building up a force with power to strike in Asia as far afield as the U.S. territory of Guam, the Pentagon said. Well, yeah, now they menace U.S. shores on the east and west coast, Atlantic and Pacific, with their nuke subs. In an annual report to Congress, the U.S. Defense Department said Monday that China was ramping up investment in an array of areas, including nuclear weapons, long-range missiles, submarines, aircraft carriers, and cyber warfare. Oh, but the government will take over the free internet and shut down free speech and get rid of net neutrality to protect us from the communist Chinese they created. And I remember old-timers writing about this, Anthony Sutton, who worked for Congress, and others, that in '49 Mao Zedong had been put in power and that Chiang Kai-shek had been double-crossed by the CIA. And then years later, I saw the CIA section chief in an interview from 1949 bragging that they put Mao in, and David Rockefeller's now written books about it, bragging how they put Mao Zedong into power, who killed conservatively 64 million people. The Chinese government says 80+ million. The balance of cross-strait military forces continues to shift in the mainland's favor. The report said, the Pentagon said, China's buildup on the Taiwan Strait has continued unabated, despite improving political and commercial relations since the island elected Beijing-friendly President Mei Ying-jeou in 2008. What happened in 2000? What deal was made and never stopped by Reagan or Bush Sr., giving them the Panama Canal? This is all part of a sellout. Globalism is where mega corporations come in, buy off your federal and local governments, and have the laws changed to give them unfair traded balance so they can consolidate control over every industry. Then they move into the police state phase, knowing that those populations are going to resist them. This is in the IMF and World Bank documents that linked in 2002. And, of course, the John Perkins, economic hitman, he wrote about it. Many others have exposed it. Then they come in with a police state, which they also privatize, so they make profits off of oppressing you. It's a extremely Machiavellian program of control. It's pure genius. But only a dumbed-down public can be defeated by this system. If you're aware of it and how illegitimate it is, and cut through the propaganda and stand up and say no, their system will fail. But because it's always covert and they always deny to your face what they're admittedly doing, it's hard to defeat when you've got a television head, couch potato population that doesn't see themselves in the role of freedom fighters. And if you go back to China 150 years ago, it was taken over by Western powers and divided into more than 10 different units. In some cases, there were more than 15 regions, generally about 11, controlled by different European powers, including the United States. The United States had a sector of China that it controlled and exploited. And so the United States, as we know it, doesn't exist. It's been absorbed by the North American Union system and the Transatlantic Treaty of 2007 with the EU under its rules. And under these new rules, the Bill of Rights and Constitution and the Congress itself has become ceremonial. They're nothing but managers and errand boys that carry out these larger operations. And so as this program of consolidation accelerates, they will continue to play nationalist tensions to get more defense funding in the name of countering China that they have built up. But they gave China the Panama Canal. They relinquished many areas of Africa to China. They've relinquished many areas of Asia to China. They have allowed China to build up high-tech weapon systems. They've given China these systems, and China is now the new model of the New World Order. So the United States is just a exploitation ground by the globalists, just like China is. The American people are going into an authoritarian system. Our old free society is being phased out. We are more and more becoming an unfree nation, just like China has been under tyranny for centuries. Mexico is under tyranny. Europe is sinking into tyranny. What is the EU? A bunch of unelected bureaucrats paid off by major corporations looting their population. It's the same global cabal, a global corporate governance system that has removed checks and balances and is setting up high-tech surveillance and oppression grids and private mercenary systems to oppress what's left of free humanity. And so the United States, while it's been funding the global empire, has been getting the blame for the crimes of the globalist. And now as we enter the final phase, the United States is being fully bankrupt and hung out to dry, and Maurice Strong and Kofi Annan and all these globalists are moving to China as their new command base. And so we see the Pentagon now hyping all of these threats, saying, oh, there's a warning over Chinese military. China's military power is growing, AP reports, and challenging them. Washington Times, China targeting U.S. troops with arms buildup. Pentagon cites anti-access missiles in report that they're aggressively building up military forces to strike U.S. forces in the Western Pacific and elsewhere. As part of the Pentagon calls an array of high-tech anti-access missiles, submarines, and warplanes in its latest annual report. So again, we're all looking at this as a U.S. versus China situation when it's the globalists above our nations playing us off against each other and profiting off the enslavement in both areas. Here's another one. Reuters. China, U.S. playing risky game on the high seas. The game of military bluff that China and the United States are playing off the Chinese coast could erupt in full-fledged crisis, hitting the arteries of global trade if the Pentagon worries about missteps ever to come. China has been investing big slices of its growing wealth. We buy DVD players and television sets and toys and furniture and linens and everything else, and they buy weapons. And they produce it in their own country, so they have an industry. And if you're going to have a war economy, it should at least help your own nation. But notice, we don't get to have that here. China has been investing in big slices of its growing wealth in modernizing its military and turning its once cranky Navy into a blue water fleet that can project power far from its shores with nuclear subs and aircraft carriers.